This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
Hello, everyone. Gabby here.
And I'm Brenna.
And welcome back to the Mystery of Everything podcast. So today's episode is an occult because over on my YouTube channel, I've been doing a lot of cults. I've been doing a lot of chemical weapons, and I figured this would be more fun with two people for the podcast. So
yeah,
I'm also recording it here, and it has a lot to do with me having no time to write multiple scripts.
But also because it'll be fun.
Exactly. So how does a cult that started in India end up in Oregon? I'm not even kidding. Like, a lot of cults end up in Oregon. And after 4 years, fall apart completely due to violent actions in which they actually tried to take over a town by force. Well, today's story is going to answer all of these questions and more as we discuss Rajneeshpuram. So I just want to say that there's also a very long series on Netflix called The Wild Wild West. And I did watch part of it. Although I don't love dramatized documentaries. I don't enjoy true crime documentaries. I don't know why.
Oh,
They're just
I love
so
true crime.
So, first thing about the cult. First, we need to look at how this religious movement came to be. So back in the 1970s, a man by the name of Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh gained a following as a spiritual leader. So Bhagwan essentially means guru or revered person. Some person in my YouTube comments said it means God as well. And he was from Pune, India. And people from around the world, they traveled all the way there to learn from him. So the large draw that he had was he could appoint someone as a sannyasin, which was traditionally a person who renounced all of their materialistic desires in favor of a simple spiritual life. But then he kind of, did a remix of it, and he called it Rajneeshi, which was the more popular term. And people traveled from everywhere to listen to him speak about his teachings. I mean, they came from America, Europe, you name it. He was a really big figure. His teachings, they included principles from Zen Buddhism, Hindu traditions, progressive psychology, Gurdjieff, and Nietzsche. And upon arriving in Pune, people from the West ended up falling in love with what they found at his ashram. And a lot of them didn't want to leave. Like, I'm not even joking on this documentary. It was like, they were like, it's perfect here. I never want to leave. But the thing that he
so
did,
easily, sorry, I could so easily be pulled into a cult. Like,
same.
I know people are like,
even,
how could you? I could never. Like, yes, I could. You put a little razzle dazzle in front of me and I would be like, I will follow you anywhere.
But so the interesting thing that he did, though, is he utilized meditation as a product. And he made sure that when people came to his ashram, they paid for his services in dollars.
Ooh.
Not like the local money, in dollars. So the money that came in from this, he used it to develop his ashram and make it like bigger and cooler. And according to Sheila, they set up a bank with a entire card system, and they got several $100,000, which was worth a lot in India, especially back in the 70s. So the thing is, he started teaching about enlightened capitalism, and that's where the entire Rajneeshi belief system started. So with enlightened capitalism, you were allowed to enjoy worldly things, and then you combine that with spiritualism. So he called this entire concept Zorba the Buddha. So with this new belief, people were actually allowed to enjoy things like cars, houses, jewels, as long as they combined it with their beliefs. He believed that people didn't have to isolate themselves to meditate and be spiritual. They could participate in life and still be enlightened. And due to this, his following expanded a lot.
Yeah.
So Rajneesh, however, with all of his new teachings, they ended up at odds with the Indian government. He was really combative, and this led to a ton of disagreements and altercations between his neighbors and officials. So the Indian officials and politicians, they took action against him. And these actions led to them blocking expansion plans for his ashram. And basically, I've said that word a ton, an ashram is literally just a religious community or retreat. So basically the place that he lived and where his followers gathered. They also started to deny visas for his followers. So people from Western countries could not visit. And then they opened criminal investigations against him and his followers. Things got so bad that fundamental Hindus were pissed off. And one fundamentalist ended up throwing a knife at Bhagwan. So due to all of this, his operation in Pune became really difficult to continue. And on June 1st, 1981, he ended up leaving and relocating to the US. The funny thing though, and it shows it in the documentary, is that he actually abandoned his ashram and thousands of his followers when he left. They didn't know he was leaving.
Aww.
It's literally, they were like, oh, we've never seen him leave before. And then his Rolls Royce literally just rolls out the gate.
No.
And they couldn't find him. And so one guy who was a lawyer for them later on, and he actually found them. He found them in Oregon and he called and he was like, hey, so I used to be a member in India. And they were like, okay, are you did you transfer? He was like, no. They were like, okay, well, you can come. You can just show up and we'll get that sorted. Be so for real. So his first stop upon leaving India and arriving in the US was to stop at his newly purchased mansion in Montclair, New Jersey. So remember, as part of his new teachings, he wanted people to embrace worldly things along with spirituality. So he really practiced what he preached. So before leaving India, he replaced his prior secretary Lakshmi with his new secretary, Sheila. And this is due to the fact that before they were supposed to leave India, Lakshmi spent a lot of time trying to find a new place for his ashram in India, and she failed horribly. So he goes and he calls Sheila and he's like, hey, what do you think of her? Do you think she's going to be good? And Sheila was like, I think she's terrible. And so he actually...
Aww.
Yeah, so he gave Sheila the job and he also gave her irrevocable power of attorney. And she ended up becoming the spokesperson for him because right after this happened and they left for the US, because it was her idea to go to the US, he took a vow of silence and he stopped talking.
What the hell?
A lot happened. Then on June 13th, Sheila's second husband, her first husband had died earlier on, and it was really, really sad, in the documentary. I'm not even joking, because Bhagwan was like, hey, don't let him see that you're sad because you don't want him to, be sad while he's dying. So she had to be so happy and not cry while her husband was literally dying. And then he had the doctors put her to sleep for 3 days or something after he died. And then when she woke up, he was like, okay, you're good now. And I guess she was good then. So... And she said, though, that it was the greatest sorrow she had ever felt. So it was kind of sad. But then her second husband, he was the one that negotiated the purchase of the 64,000-acre Big Muddy Ranch in southern Wasco County and northern Jefferson County, Oregon. They paid $5.75 million for this ranch. And initially, when they moved in and they bought it, their story was that they were just going to build a communal farm for 40 people. But very soon... truckload after truckload of mobile homes and building materials started showing up, and then their building permits gave away the fact that they had a plan to do something a lot bigger. In addition, they started purchasing a lot of property in Antelope itself, and that's where the problem starts to grow. So by September, when Bhagwan himself arrived, people soon realized that they had lofty goals to create a historical community that was a utopia. Some followers saw this as building a shrine for Bhagwan while he was still alive. They did a lot of press work at this time. The press were always there, so they could show them the development. They were really proud of what they were doing, and they wanted to show it off. So I'm not even joking. There were so many cool news clips of them being like, oh yeah, we're building a school. We're converting all of this desert into farmland. It was interesting. And they early on, they gotten a lot of really smart intellectuals as part of their cult. Yeah. So they had a lot of really intelligent people who could pull this off. They also attracted a ton of new members from North America and Europe. The cult had ended up getting so many people from the West that were well-educated that were just completely burnt out with the mundane and simultaneously overwhelming lifestyles that they lived. The daily grind had completely burnt them out. So they had lawyers, architects, engineers, civil planners. They basically had all the expertise required already in their ranks to build their own society. And that's literally what they were working towards. A quote from the documentary was, "It was city planning, the likes of which was never seen." I mean, they worked hard and they worked fast.
Which
they
is
ended up
smart. I mean, you have everything you need, and you're not paying them because you're in a cult, and you're just working towards. I don't know.
Yep.
I mean, I get it. I know this is going to end bad, I'm sure, but
if I could start my own town, I would. They ran their own pipes throughout the entire ranch. They built roads. They established their own source, like their power source, capable of supporting 10,000 people. Women were seen as equal to the men during building, and they did as much work as the men. In fact, women outnumbered men in the community by 54 to 46%, and they had a ton of leadership roles. And pretty soon, the community had a hospital, shopping mall, police force, restaurants, an entire banking system. They even bought a residence hotel in downtown Portland where people who visited the community could stay. They undertook the hard work of converting basically deserted wasteland into farmland. One of the quotes from the docuseries is, "We were literally turning the desert green." So a lot of the work that they did with the farmland was really impressive. They took dry landscape, made it into a garden, and this added several thousand acres to Oregon's agricultural land. In order to do this, they ended up building dams in ravines. They built wells. They pumped water from the John Day River. They restored stream beds. They built greenhouses, and they installed irrigation pipes. But in order for the community to grow even more, they needed to become accepted as a municipality, which basically means they needed to become a city that had their own local government. They needed everything to be so official because the ranch was zoned for farm use. And so if they didn't get it changed to an actual municipality, an actual city, they wouldn't be able to develop it the way they wanted. And so the city became formed, was called the city of Rajneeshpuram. And this got approved in the spring of 1982. So they actually got the approval. They actually got, like 1 year later, they got to be an actual city.
Yeah.
So over the course of the next 3 years, the community grew from 2,500 full-time residents, but during summer, this number could reach 15,000 for festivals and events.
Holy shit.
However, yeah, it was a huge influx. Keep in mind, this was like a little sleepy, quiet, old, small town with like nobody. And then all of these thousands of people showed up. So the residents were not happy with them. They started noticing that the Bhagwan literally had dozens of Rolls Royces that he drove regularly to the nearby town of Madras, and people did not trust him and all of the people that showed up to town. It was quiet, and then it was flooded by outsiders. So the people of the town literally saw it as the downfall of their civilization, especially when an ad about exploring sexuality appeared in the newspaper.
Oh.
Yeah. The biggest issue that really had people worried is the fact that the Jonestown cult, like remember the one we were talking about where all the people kill themselves?
Jonestown.
That was really recent.
I've watched like every documentary about that. Jonestown is insane. I get why they would be concerned then. If Jonestown had just happened, then I would be a little hesitant myself.
Yeah. And one of the members, the daughter of one of the members of this new cult was the daughter of one of the guys who covered the Jonestown story.
Oh.
And she was like, oh, if he could see this, if he saw this, he would see what's different. He would see what's positive. Like
that's
she
what they
literally
all
said
say.
That. So news stories called Rajneesh a cult of Satan, and a lot of Christians were really concerned that the cult would affect Christians. To make matters worse, Rajneeshpuram started buying property within the city of Antelope, and they started putting business and residents in the town. Soon, the cult members started moving into the town and buying up everything that was available. The documentary highlighted that they bought a cafe in town and they named it Sorba the Buddha, and it became a gathering for the cult members. And obviously this really pissed off the residents because this was their cafe. This was where the old townspeople would gather. And now it's like full of, people in deep red because they wore deep red with like a photo of Rajneesh on it. So, I mean, they stuck out like sore thumbs. Like it wasn't subtle at all.
It doesn't sound like it.
Did archaeologists discover Noah's Ark?
Is the rapture coming as soon as the Euphrates River dries up?
Does the Bible condemn abortion?
Don't you wish you had a trustworthy academic resource to help make sense of all of this?
Well, I'm Dan Beecher, and he's award-winning Bible scholar and TikTok sensation Dr. Dan McClellan, and we want to invite you to the Data Over Dogma podcast,
where our mission is to increase public access to the academic study of the Bible and religion, and also to combat the spread of misinformation about the same.
But, in a fun way.
Every week we tackle fascinating topics, we go back to source materials in their original languages,
And we interview top scholars in the field.
so whether you're a devout believer,
Or you're just interested in a clear-eyed, deeply informed look at one of the most influential books of all time,
we think you're going to love the Data Over Dogma podcast.
wherever you subscribe to awesome shows.
Hello everyone, Takuya here,
And I'm Gabby.
and we are the hosts of History of Everything, a podcast which you can probably guess by the name is, it's about everything. Do you want to know why people thought potatoes were evil and would give you syphilis? Are you curious about all the stories of the terrible and stupid ways that people have kicked the bucket over the years? Do you want to hear tales about all of the different badasses of history and the lives that they had brought to life? Well, if so, then look no further. History of Everything is just the right podcast for you. It's available on Spotify, Pandora, and anywhere else that you get your podcast from. Join us for some fun and just see how weird and wacky history can be.
The news stories that the documentary played were terrible, though. It was really shocking, the things that people were saying about the cult. Basically, tensions were really high, and the residents of Antelope made a lot of threats against the Rajneeshis. They drove around with guns in their trucks. One man was quoted as saying, "They're not asking to be shot, they're basically begging for it." And here's the thing, you're from the country, right?
Yeah.
So someone in my YouTube comments was like, that's not even a threat. That's literally just something country people say. And I'm like, that's wild.
That's a
I don't know
threat.
where you're from. Yeah, I was like, I don't know where you're from, but that's not.
Yeah, like I'm
that's
from
not
such a
thing.
small town that it's a known thing that someone has killed someone by putting them through a wood chipper, and we don't say that.
You just said it. I love that.
I mean, like, I'm not gonna be like, you're just asking to be shot. Like, no, that's not a thing. It's not a thing.
But there were also stickers made that said "Bag the Bagwan" or "Better Dead Than Red." The entire thing was really dark. People were
Damn.
antagonizing each other. Yeah, they were not even like a little bit chill about this. They were like, "No, we're gonna get rid of them. We're gonna do it ourselves."
Oh, I have a feeling this is not going to turn out good.
Oh yeah, it turns out terribly. So the town of Antelope actually tried to disincorporate their town in an election that came around in April of 1982. And that's when things got really intense. The voter turnout was 120%, and the Rajneeshis defeated the disincorporation by 55 to 42 due to the fact that they flooded the vote the day of by registering new voters. So, side note, in order to vote in Oregon, at least back then, you only had to be a resident for 20 days, which made it much easier for cult members to move in and sway elections. This disincorporation that the townspeople were trying to do would have essentially dissolved the town's local government and put it under the rule of the county that it was located in. But with the disincorporation failing, it was a huge win for the Rajneeshis because it was basically kind of like a civil war with votes. However, the majority of the registered voters in this election were Rajneeshi, and the Rajneeshis won. And this pissed off the townspeople even more. Like, it really pissed them off. And this
these
would lead to the name of...
townspeople sound scary.
Yeah, but the name of Antelope ended up getting changed to the city of Rajneesh. So, I don't know. I'd be a little bit peeved myself.
The city of
Little bit.
Rajneesh. Like, damn, they're going all out.
So... Then in November of 1982, city council elections of Antelope led to a full city council of Rajneeshi members, except for 2 members that were from the town. But one of the members, upon hearing that he was only one of 2 non-Rajneeshis on the council, he just left town. He was like, I'm done. I'm not even going to do
I don't even
that.
blame him. I don't blame him at all. I'd be like, all right, this is it. I'm bouncing. I did what I could.
Right? Like, I don't know. I feel like it'd be a little hostile work environment. That's what I think. And then in February of 1983, the Rajneeshis officially took office on that council. Now, according to the documentary, every single thing that they did to take over the town was perfectly legal. But they also did a ton of things like approve public parks for nude, like sunbathing. So I totally understand why the locals would be upset there.
Yeah.
Like, you're in a quiet town and all of a sudden the sex cult is sunbathing.
Yeah.
It'd be stressful.
It'd be different
In
for sure.
addition, it would. I mean, I'd join in, but you know.
But I get why people would be like,
Well, that's not the worst part. So the members were really loud in public, and the residents were upset about hearing, quote, orgasmic experiences all night. In addition, old-time residents had like a lot of other new changes coming in. So the council raised taxes, which led to issues for residents that were on a fixed income. Then they changed all the names in the town to the names of Hindu holy men. And then residents complained of large searchlights flashing into their houses at night. And then they opened a garbage dump next to a local church, and they named it the Adolf Hitler garbage dump.
What?
So,
why?
not ideal. I don't know. I don't
All right, now
know.
they're just trolling, literally. Now you are just trolling. Like, come on, guys.
So, I couldn't say that name on YouTube because it's YouTube, but I could say it here.
You can't
But
say
they
that on
named it
YouTube.
No, you have to be really careful what you say on YouTube. They're very strict.
You can't say Adolf Hitler. What about all
They
the
will.
Hitler videos? There's a bunch of Hitler videos.
Yeah, but they're usually not monetized.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they demonetize very swiftly. or a
Very
lot of stuff.
swift like for the Hitler, understandably.
And then if you think all of these crazy changes were not, they were enough, they also replaced the police force with Rajneeshis, and they named them the Peace Force. And this was a properly trained police force that was armed. Like, it was funded with public dollars. And then in one incident, this Peace Force dealt with one particular situation in a way that made everything a lot worse. So one community member, not like the Rajneeshi, but the Antelope resident, he tried protesting what was essentially an occupation of his town. And he ended up getting arrested by the Peace Force, which made the original residents feel as though they were being held hostage in their own town. So you remember how they bought up a ton of buildings in towns? Well, one of these buildings was located in Portland, and it was the hotel I mentioned earlier. They ended up converting it to Hotel Rajneesh. And on July 29th, 1983, a man checked into a room and he placed multiple bombs that went off and caused the entire hotel to burn down. So the first bomb exploded at 1:22 a.m. and then two more bombs that were placed under the beds of the room exploded about an hour later. The perpetrator was a man by the name of Stephen P. Pastor, and he was the only one that got injured in the blast when he lost some of his fingers. But Pastor, he ended up being convicted of the bombing and spending 5 years incarcerated. Ultimately, though, he was linked to a Muslim fundamentalist group, so they had a really hard time even figuring out what his motive was. The thing is, this hotel bombing is seen as the event that really caused the Rajneeshis to militarize. Sheila in the documentary said that after this bombing, they went out and they bought weapons. They started training to use weapons using targets and actual proper military training. Prior to that hotel bombing, Sheila claimed that they did not have any weapons at the community. But the Rajneeshis then implemented armed security from the members that they trained. They also built guarded checkpoints along the road to Rajneesh, and they built electrical fencing around the entire perimeter. They even had helicopters with security teams. They locked in. They locked in. However, one of the biggest issues of Rajneeshpuram is that while there was freedom of religion in the US, the location of the community violated a ton of different land use laws. So remember, the community had said that they wanted to use the ranch for agricultural purposes, but then they switched. An organization called 1,000 Friends ended up filing a lawsuit to have the buildings in Rajneeshpuram torn down. The court wanted to emphasize farmland was for farming.
Makes
Their
sense.
goal was to get rid of the buildings and get rid of the cult, though. The land that Rajneesh was located on was not great for farming, so it wouldn't have made that much of a difference, but the lawyers argued in terms of precedent. Because if this land, which was supposed to be farmland, was allowed to be used for a city, what would stop other types of cities from popping up on other land that is fertile in Oregon? Which,
Yeah, that's
they have a
valid.
point. This argument led to securing rulings from the Land Use Board of Appeals and the Land Development and Conservation Commission in 1983, and these invalidated the entire city, which led to 4 years of litigation. Now, as all of this was going on, information about the cult from their own meeting minutes ended up getting leaked to the Attorney General of Oregon, Dave Frohnmeyer. And so he decided, hey, we got to investigate this cult. And what he presented was that the city of Rajneeshpuram did not practice separation of church and state, which was a problem. They had law enforcement agencies, they had weapons, they had a public school, but everything about the town was controlled by religion. Hell, the school itself caused a really big issue because there was religious imagery at the school and the teachers wore religious garb. And this is like a public funded school. That's not allowed.
Yeah.
In addition, there were questions about whether the police force was legal because they weren't loyal to the residents of the town. They were loyal to Bhagwan. So that's a real problem. They're not protecting and serving the people. They're protecting and serving the organization.
No, it's getting a little dangerous now, getting a little out of hand.
So Frohnmeyer, he actually ended up issuing an opinion that stated that the city was the functional equivalent of a religious commune, which meant that the separation of church and state made the city ineligible for state funding and participation in services such as law enforcement. And all of this led to an entire legal fight about religion and politics. People drew parallels between Mormons and Salt Lake City, Utah, claiming that Rajneeshpuram was actually just being unfairly targeted because people do this in other places. The state ended up filing a lawsuit to reverse the municipality of Rajneeshpuram and the city of Rajneesh. This led the Rajneeshis to feel as though they were being unfairly targeted by the government as laws and rulings were being made about them behind closed doors. And you think, okay, well, this can't get bad enough. It always can, guys. It always can.
What do you get when you take two childhood friends with a passion for unexplored history and a whole lot of booze?
You get the goofiest game in history, Queen's Podcast.
Hi, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Katie, and we're the host of Queen's Podcast.
Join us while we spill the tea on women from history.
We get into all kinds of stories here, like biographies of lesser-known figures. For instance, Saida al-Hura, powerful pirate queen.
To the stories you might already know, like Marie Antoinette or Cleopatra, but with a fun twist.
Each queen is paired with a cocktail that'll totally get you in the mood to hear fun, juicy, and dramatic stories from history.
Because history is so much more than just dudes on a battlefield, and we believe that the female perspective and roles are just as deserving of their time in the spotlight.
Right. So come get to know these queens. Find us wherever you get your podcasts.
Cheers.
Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara's podcast, From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Mary Astor has been keeping a diary.
Mary writes everything down.
And so this torrid affair with George S. Kaufman is chronicled on a daily basis.
In great detail. And Ike pulls out a box and gives McAllister a ring saying, here's something to remember me by. This article caused Daryl Zanuck to hit the roof.
Actress Ruth Roman followed that up with playing a foil to Betty Davis in Beyond the Forest. I mean, if you can stand toe-to-toe with her, boy.
And she does, because she plays the daughter of the man that Betty Davis kills out on the hunting trip.
And it's directed by King Vidor, so he's no slouch.
How do you go wrong with that?
Yeah.
Speaking of the Oscars, talking about what I call beginner's luck, it's all about the actors and actresses who won an Oscar on their very first film.
Get your fix of old Hollywood from Steve and Nan on the podcast From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
To make matters worse, in 1984, the Rajneeshis decided that they would run in the elections in order to try to gain control of the governing board of Wesco County. And in order to do this, they took less than ideal means. Previously, they had won elections by using legal loopholes. But for this particular election, they started to stoop to illegal means. In order to have enough people to win the election, Rajneeshpuram encouraged people who were already members to move to the city and register to vote. However, this turned out to be only about 1,500 people. So they decided to take things a step further, and they started a program where they gathered like busloads of people from around the country, mainly African-American men experiencing homelessness from states like New York, Florida, and California, and they expected these homeless people to register to vote and help them win the election. The thing is, though, the homeless people that were brought in to vote, they ended up becoming a huge problem for Rajneeshpuram, as they were not ready to handle an influx of that many people, And after one man ended up having like a violent outburst at the compound, the Rajneeshis decided that it would be best to simply drug all the homeless people.
What the absolute fuck?
They were not chill.
No, they were so not chill. Like you're called the, what's their police called? The peace something?
Peace Force?
Peace Force my ass. Like what?
Yeah, so they took Haldol and they put it into beer that was then served to the homeless. Also, you can actually read reports from the state police on all of this online because Rajneeshpuram was being watched closely due to the movement of all of these people into their compound.
Yeah.
They were afraid that an event like the mass Jonestown suicide, I guess, was going to happen here. But the thing is, since the authorities were aware that they were trying to bring in all of these people to sway the election results, they ran into trouble. Oregon, the Secretary of State, Norma Paulus, she was in charge of overseeing the election, and she was like, you know what, we're not going to allow these people to sway the votes with an obvious ploy. She shut down the voter registration leniency that was allowing the mass registration of all of these homeless people. Everyone who was planning on voting had to register in person and not by mail. And they were they had to go through this approval process, and very, very few of the homeless were approved to vote in the election. The Rajneeshis ended up simply taking them to neighboring towns and then dropping them off. They were like, okay, well, this won't work, bye. And there's actual clips from the documentary where the people from Madras, which was that nearby town, they were like, what are we supposed to do? You just brought a bunch of homeless people with no jobs, with nothing, and you drop them off in our town. What are we supposed to do with them? That was pretty uncool. That wasn't very cash money.
No,
but
not at all.
As soon as they learned it wouldn't benefit them, they were like, peace out.
See you, bye.
So the thing is, there was still record voter turnout by the locals because everyone in Wasco County showed up to vote. And the
I bet they were
not
all
able.
pissed. They're like, okay, we're all in this together.
And so the Rajneeshis weren't able to compete, and they weren't able to take over that county government. And this is where things started getting rough. So the Wasco County Planning Office was then lit on fire, and then potentially poisoned boxes of chocolates were sent to authorities. I'm not even kidding. In the documentary, there's this thing where they were like, oh, we got these boxes of chocolate, and they were like, they assumed it came from 1,000 friends or somebody else they worked with, and they started eating them. But one guy met the guy from the organization, and they were like, thanks for the chocolates. And he was like, we didn't send you any chocolates. And so when they took the boxes, they had already eaten some, but they, examined them. One in the middle had a needle hole in it. So they were pretty sure it was poisoned. So not great. Then the district attorney, Mike Sullivan, he fell violently ill and almost died. Hell, they even gave salmonella-laced water to Wasco County officials that visited the complex. They weren't even being subtle. But before all of this, I need to talk about the largest bioterrorist attack in the U.S. history, at that point at least. So the Rajneeshis, they contaminated the salad bars at 10 restaurants in the Dalles, Oregon, with salmonella. And 751 people got sick, with 45 of these being so sick that they were hospitalized. And all of this was done in order to control the voter turnout in that election that they lost. They were hoping that people got too sick to vote. And it's crazy because everyone suspected something weird had happened with the outbreak, but they weren't sure if it was a worker that spread it. So they didn't even immediately think it was the cult. But in 1985, it did come out that the Rajneeshis had sprinkled salmonella culture on salad bar ingredients at multiple restaurants. So
I don't even have words. What?
Just some chill guys doing crime.
Oh my God, they're so not chill.
No.
So much crime, so not chill.
And then on top of literally all of this,
it gets worse. How?
Yeah. So they ended up getting busted for the largest immigration fraud case in U.S. history. They attempted to go after Bhagwan by deporting him. They claimed that he was not able to perform his duties as a religious leader because he had an oath of silence for a year and a half. In addition, they said he couldn't be a religious leader because he taught the antitheses of religion. The hope was that they would deport Bhagwan and then everyone in Rajneeshpuram would leave. In order to fight this, though, a community leader, because remember they had a ton of lawyers, he formed a nonprofit legal corporation that actually grew pretty large, and they were able to fight this deportation claim, proving that Bhagwan was in fact a religious leader. However, that was not the end. The authorities were able to uncover the fact that American sannyasins were committing fraud with foreign sannyasins in order to get citizenship. So what they would do is each member would go to an immigration office together and they would form an entire fraudulent life together. So like it'd be one person from Florida, one person from the place in Oregon. They would fly to like Texas at the immigration office. They would go in, they would start like a whole life. They would, set everything up like they were married. And then once they got their citizenship, they would split up and go back to their normal lives. I mean, they got apartments together. They got married. They did everything to make their marriage look believable. They got friends. They did the whole 9 yards. But once things started really going south with immigration, in 1985, the Rajneeshis decided to take matters into their own hands, and they established a plot to murder Charles Turner, who was the man that was leading that immigration investigation. In fact, they didn't just stop at Turner. They decided, hey, why stop here? Let's go after Frohnmeyer as well. And so they made like a list of everybody in authority who they thought threatened the commune. And their hope was that by removing these people, they would remove the motivation to destroy the cult. Ultimately, though, and I guess luckily, nothing came of it and no one was assassinated because Sheila at the time, she was super busy with like a lot of other things and she was like not able to coordinate the assassination.
Sorry, I don't have time to plan this murder, guys. I'm a little busy.
Yeah. And the crazy thing, though, is about Sheila is she had everyone, including Rajneesh himself, wiretapped. In fact, the uncovering of the wiretapping scheme was one of the largest mass wiretapping schemes at that time, like up to that point. Sheila's house had 10,000 tapes of wiretapping.
What?
Like they literally were like, let's just break as many law-breaking records as we can. And
Sheila was ready.
She was. The thing is, though, she was in the documentary, all the videos of her, like, I get it. She was like very like peppy, like she was very stylish. I was like, hell yeah.
Like, no one is going to pull one over on me.
So the interesting thing is before all of this was uncovered, Sheila, the person who was arguably behind a lot of this, she ended up just upping and like leaving the cult. She made the decision to leave the cult and she left on September 13th, 1985. And that's when she fled to Europe. And 2 days after she fled, Bhagwan was so pissed off. He was so mad that she left that he came out and accused Sheila of all of the crimes that she committed publicly. Ooh. He told of the attempted murders, the wiretapping, the arson. Bhagwan accused Sheila and her close people of being a gang of fascists. Like there's recordings of him publicly saying all of this. And so
she hurt him bad.
Well, the thing is, because he did this, though, it gave people the opportunity and the reason to go in and search the entire commune, which caused the entire thing to fall.
He's essentially fucking himself by doing that because he's just opening the door for investigations.
He should have just shut up. So then authorities came in and they discovered her massive wiretapping networks. They discovered the bioterror research facilities that were located in her house. And on October 28th, 1985, she was arrested in West Germany and extradited to Oregon. There, she was sentenced to 10 years in a federal prison, but she got released like 2.5 years later in 1988. And upon her release, she moved to Switzerland after she was denied reentry to Germany. And when she settled there, she started working, taking care of elderly people. And that eventually grew to be 2 private nursing homes that she ran. She had gotten her Swiss citizenship through her husband, who ran the Zurich commune. But while she was serving her prison sentence, he ended up passing away. Which also, I did look up her Instagram. She'd be chilling. I
was gonna say she sounds like a go-getter, though. Like,
yeah,
it sounds like you can't keep Sheila down. Like, you're not keeping Sheila down.
So interestingly enough, though, even though this community in Oregon caused the most publicity, Rajneeshpuram actually had communities in Italy, Germany, Australia, Netherlands, Portugal, Switzerland, India. I mean, it was everywhere. All the communities had people who were working to support everyone, and there were roughly 30,000 sannyasins and overall members. So not including sannyasins, it was like 500,000. They had up to like 500,000 members total. The cult was massive.
What the hell?
Yeah. Ultimately, Bhagwan was so deeply hurt by Sheila fleeing from him, though, that he said if the authorities wouldn't catch her, his people would. And Sheila, in the documentary, she ended up talking about how afraid she was of Bhagwan and his sannyasins. Bhagwan, he started revealing everything that happened, and the members of the community started feeling really betrayed, of course, because they were in the dark. They didn't know any of this was happening. But, you know, they weren't going to let that keep them down. They started restructuring. They started trying to get new leadership. And a lot of them planned to stay. So we know what happened to Sheila, but what happened to Bhagwan? Well, after he exposed Sheila for everything that she did and the FBI got into the commune, this led to the overall downfall of the commune. And it didn't stop Bhagwan himself from getting into trouble. He ended up getting indicted on immigration fraud charges. And when he tried to escape by private jet, he ended up getting arrested in North Carolina, where he pleaded guilty to the charges and made a plea bargain because he realized if he didn't make a plea bargain, he wouldn't be able to leave and go back to India. So he just got that done. And after this, he returned to India and spent time trying to find another place to reestablish his ashram. But he was unsuccessful. In 1986, he settled in India and he worked to reestablish himself. However, his health began to quickly decline, and on January 19, 1990, he died of heart failure in Pune, India. So the commune in Oregon, they ended up being abandoned, but even though a lot of them left that community, they stayed loyal to the Rajneeshpuram affiliation. In fact, there are small centers dedicated to this organization throughout the US, Europe, and India.
What?
Before Rajneesh died, he actually renamed to Osho, and they rebranded. And Osho meditation centers remain active in more than 80 countries. They continue to run yoga and meditation programs. I mean, you can find them online. They look pretty chill. In fact, the Osho International Meditation Resort currently attracts as many as 200,000 visitors a year, and his followers still continue to spread his beliefs. And yeah, that's the insane story of Rajneeshpuram. I mean, it was a lot.
That was literally about to say, that was a lot.
I didn't expect it going into it. Someone was like, oh, you should do this cult on YouTube. And I did it. And oh my God, they were prolific.
I don't know how I've never heard of that. Because everyone's heard of Jonestown. I've never heard of, like, what?
Oh, I have like a long list of cults I've never heard about that I'm going to be covering because I'm like, hell yeah.
I love a good cult. I mean, yeah. I love learning. I love learning about a good cult.
See, my toxic trait, and I made a TikTok about this, a YouTube video, where I was like, yeah, no, I absolutely would have joined that cult. It's just, I mean, they were dancing in the park. They looked so free and happy. Hell yeah.
I could get wrapped up in something so easily. And then before long, I'd be like, yeah, I'll wiretap blah, blah, blah for you.
No, there's one lady there who literally, she was just trying to like hang out. And then she was on the documentary, like, and all of a sudden I'm buying guns.
That would be me. Oh, that's so bad.
Like,
I'd be like, I was literally just here for the vibes and the fruit, and then suddenly I'm poisoning people with salmonella. Like, what?
That escalated quickly.
Oh, that was a good one.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
See you
Bye.
next time. Bye.
Have you ever wondered how inbred the Habsburgs really were? What women in the past used for birth control? Or what Queen Victoria's 9 children got up to? On the History Tea Time podcast, I profile remarkable queens and LGBTQ+ royals, explore royal family trees, and delve into women's medical history and other fascinating topics. Join me every Tuesday for History Tea Time, wherever fine podcasts are enjoyed.